the quality of life for all. Meanwhile, the Indian Railways is also hoping to roll out the first prototype of the Vande Bharat sleeper train by March 2024 and will give travellers a taste of Bharat's infrastructural prowess. Vande Bharat sleeper train will be a class apart, quote unquote, from the Rajdhani. The train will have 3 toilets, a mini pantry, reading lamps for every seat, a dressing mirror, mobile stand and a handrest cum coffee table between seats. The train will have 22 coaches and the first version of the train will have 857 berths, of which 5% would be reserved for the railway staff and the remaining will be for passengers. The International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, says India's contribution to global economic growth is expected to increase 200 basis points to 18% over the next 5 years as the nation grows at a quicker pace. The IMF has said that India's economic growth remains robust, driven by a large public capital expenditure push and resilient domestic demand. Union Home Minister Amit Shah has asserted that in the last 9 years, the Modi Sarkar has been able to bring down Maoist violence by about 52%. Urging people to vote for the BJP, Amit Shah has said that the Congress encourages Naxalism while the BJP eliminates them. That's the big story, ladies and gentlemen, as far as our country and its progress is concerned. But the larger focus on this edition of The Right Stand remains this terror outfit called Hamas, which slowly is encouraging other terrorist units also to try and rear their head. So is end Hamas the only option, and is there now more than concrete proof that the Hamas is equal to, if not far more diabolical than the ISIS?
את הזוועות שחמאס ביצע לא ראינו מאז זוועות דאעש. ילדים כפותים שהוצאו להורג עם שאר בני משפחותיהם.
Hamas committed atrocities that recall the worst ravages of ISIS, unleashing pure, unadulterated evil upon the world. There's no rationalizing it, no excusing it, period.
We ask that question with responsibility, ladies and gentlemen. Is dismantling Hamas the only option? Because just as the world was rallying together to combat the menace of the Daesh or the ISIS, Hamas has unleashed one of the biggest attacks in the world on Israel. And it's been 2 weeks since Hamas struck Israel. And the aftermath of that shocking terror strike is only unraveling. Though Hamas was always known as an Islamist militia movement and a proscribed terror group in multiple nations, it's become a household name like the ISIS or the Daesh or the Al-Qaeda post the strike on Israel. And soon Israel denounced Hamas as nothing lesser than ISIS. They said Hamas is equal to ISIS, and US President Joe Biden adding more to that note, saying that Hamas makes the ISIS look rational. Now, this brutal barbarism carried out by the Hamas cadre was a replica of Daesh style. India's Intel is actually joining the dot. Intel source via Group Editor Security Affairs Manoj Kumar Gupta reveals that Hamas and ISIS have actually several similarities and ideological moorings, and they have comparable operating styles. The source reveals that the Hamas not only accepts the ideology of the Daesh, but also its brutal manner of killing. Intel source reveals that the ISIS also, like the ISIS, the Hamas also sees the Western world as its enemy. And there are certain aspects which are highly xenophobic, and they also want to totally eradicate the existence of certain religious entities and denominations from the surface of this earth. Let's try and decode the striking similarity between the Hamas and the ISIS. Attack styles. The Hamas use motorcycles and drones just like, and it's very similar to what the Daesh fighters did the same in Iraq and Syria. Again, the style of execution, killing children, women, targeted, using them as shields, indiscriminate manner, signature of both the Hamas and the Daesh. In 2014, the Daesh annihilated Yazidis in the Sinjar area of northern Iraq in a similar fashion. The Daesh and the Hamas share the same radical Islamic ideology, both brutal towards human life, use the same extremely violent and barbaric actions to achieve their goals. They use innocents as terror shields. Both terror outfits are unalarmed and show no remorse at all. Every tragedy, they try to turn it around as an opportunity, and they like to wreak havoc among innocents. Exchange of cadres. In the recent years, after attacks on the Daesh in Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan and other nations, its cadre have taken shelter in Palestine, in Hamas-dominated areas. Similarly, Hamas leaders have met Daesh in Yemen and Syria on different occasions. On many Hamas-affiliated websites, it is suggested that members of the Islamic State in Sinai are also involved with the Izz al-Din al-Qassam brigades, which is the military wing of the Hamas. In fact, if you look at the geographical domination, Hamas is smaller in scale but very similar to the Daesh. Its ideological moorings very similar to the ISIS in the way of Salafia Jihadiyah. It is also important to note Hamas allowed Salafia organizations to operate in Gaza after 2007. This is what intelligence sources are telling CNN News 18 via our group editor Security Affairs Manoj Kumar Gupta. Hamas also wants to establish Islamic rule all over the world and wants to start by first dominating the Jews, wiping out the Christians. These are all similar doctrines. Like the Daesh calls to kill all non-Muslims, Khalid Mashal, one of Hamas's founders, on the 12th of October asked for the killing of Jews all over the world. Calling for jihad against Jews and Christians also demonstrates a clear connection between the Hamas and the Daesh. And that's what sets up the conversation for this evening on the Right Stand, this Friday edition, ladies and gentlemen. Hamas is equal to ISIS, and as other terror outfits get active, is dismantling this terror unit and its infrastructure the only option?
Hello, Moto.
Let's go across to Glenn Carl, former National Intelligence Officer of the CIA, Dr. Mir Javed Anfar. He is a Middle East analyst, Reichman University. Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, former GOC 15 Corps of the Indian Army with us, and also Avi Melamed, author and Middle East strategic intelligence analyst. Namaste, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much for your time this evening. And let me start with this question. Dr. Mir, would you agree with the analysis by the Indian intelligence why the Hamas and the ISIS are the same? Or is there more to this?
But I think generally, that until today, we were under the impression in Israel that Hamas was an organization that was not just a jihadi organization, but it was also an organization that had changed from its early years of simply being a jihadi anti-Israel organization to a more mature organization who took calculated risks, who carefully calculated the loss versus benefits of its actions, who wanted to stabilize the economic situation in Gaza, who wanted to rule Gaza, to continue ruling Gaza by allowing the economy to develop rather than picking unnecessary. Why it seems that, according to various reports, the Israeli intelligence assessment was lulled into believing that an attack by Hamas is unlikely, an attack of the sort that we saw on the 7th of October. This was the general outlines. But now many people in Israel now see increasing Hamas as more or less like Daesh. It's jihadi, extremist. It's extremely. It doesn't take the risks. It doesn't take the consideration of its own. It doesn't take the welfare of its own population into consideration, and it carries out very, very viciously violent acts against civilians. So More and more, yes, Hamas is being viewed as a new Palestinian and more politically correct version of Daesh, especially among the leftist, populist leftists in Europe and the United States.
Mr. Avi Melamed, would you concur? Is it true that the Daesh cadre also found refuge or found place, a home in the Gaza Strip under the Hamas post 2006-2007?
Yes, there has been a lot of reports about cooperation between Daesh that is based in Sinai and Hamas in Gaza Strip. I want to add something else to the discussion. Accurately, as you said, Hamas and ISIS, Hamas is to a large extent ISIS. Though there are different ideological aspects and so on, in the end of the day, let me explain why Hamas and ISIS in the end of the day is the same entity, or it's the same thing. Because they have two major things in common. One is the genocidal agenda. We have to emphasize that. It has to be clear. Hamas and ISIS have a genocidal agenda. You mentioned the stories of the Yazidis in the context of ISIS in Iraq, in Syria. It's the same with Hamas in the context of Israel and Jews in Israel. Here is something that is interesting to know. 2 years ago, in September 2021, Hamas held a conference in Gaza Strip. The conference was called in Arabic Wa'id al-Akhirah, which means the promise of the end of days. This is a concept that is taken from Islam radical theology. And the conference dealt with the question, what to do with the state of Israel after it will be eliminated. The conference ended with a statement by Hamas, a call for actions or recommendation statement that has 20 articles. The articles explains exactly what is going to happen to the people of Israel. Let me quote Article 16 of this statement. Article 16 says that the Jews or the Israelis that will still be alive will be scientists and people that has any kind of value for Hamas. Now, you may wonder, like the viewers, what about the rest of the people? We got an answer for that on Saturday, October 7th. So this is one reason why Hamas is ISIS. The other reason why Hamas is ISIS, they both have an apocalyptic vision of mankind. They basically want to create a huge entity, global entity called caliphate that should be a strict religious codex known by the name of Sharia law. The people that will live in this entity and will not be Muslims are doomed to live as slaves, female slaves, male slaves. They will have no human rights whatsoever. They will be inferior. So this is another common denominator between Hamas and Islamic Jihad. As my colleague Meir, Dr. Meir said very accurately, there was this kind of like PC presentation, politically correctness of Hamas trying to make cosmetics appearance, but we should have no mistakes about it. Hamas is similar to ISIS. It's ISIS twin.
But this then extends the thought continuum, General Atta Hasnain, and that brings us to the bigger question. Is going to demolishing the infrastructure, is it going to kill the ideology? If there is an ideological continuum that extends into multiple nations, and this is a fundamentalist ideology.
See,
the objective of the Israelis
this is a huge challenge, there is no doubt. The question is for me?
Yes, General Atta Hasnain. Yes, please.
Okay. This is a huge challenge. And the day we learned on the 7th of October, when I learned about this massive attack which Hamas had carried out on southern Israel, I realized this was nothing but a borrowing from ISIS ideology, ISIS strategy. Little did I know that Hamas had actually become ISIS, virtually. Let me just go back slightly. Give me a minute to just go back. ISIS started essentially as a flow out from Iraq, the Al-Qaeda in Iraq. It is an Al-Qaeda plus. It was set up essentially as something which was a counter to Al-Qaeda, going beyond having territory under its control, having finances under his control, and looking at the establishment of the caliphate. When after 3 to 4 years of operations, it was dismantled to an extent, it went into hiding all over the world. And you found the manifestation in Philippines, in the area of Marawi. It happened in Sri Lanka, 18th of April 2019, if you remember.
Yes.
It happened in Afghanistan. Now it is happening here. And now it is quite confirmed that ISIS had spread out all over the world, remained in a networked state, and here slowly the process is starting. We expected in India that this process would start from somewhere in northern Afghanistan, which is the ungoverned area at the moment. The Taliban doesn't have control over it, and it is from there that the whole area of Khorasan would be addressed.
Yes.
But I think we were mistaken there slightly. The battle has gone back to West Asia. The battle has gone to Hamas, which is already an existent terrorist organization, only now morphed with the ISIS, and everything we are seeing in the last 10, 12 days is obviously a reflection of exactly what the ISIS strategies are all about. That is the use of genocidal tendencies virtually as a strategic weapon. And you will see slowly after this, the ability to fight conventional. They did it in Mosul. It took almost 6 months to dismantle, to actually defeat them in Mosul. And Mosul was all about terror. A terror battle converted into conventional operations. This is something that the Israeli army will have to be very careful about when they go into Gaza to conduct ground operations in the very near future.
Now, here is the threat with the Daesh that we saw, that a lot of the Daesh cadre which actually congregated into Syria or aggregated there, Glenn Carl, then they were advised to disperse, quietly go back to their own countries, and to then push for the ISIS ideology and the Daesh ideology on their turf. And we had a lot of radicalized elements who came to India too. Only recently a huge ISIS-influenced module has been bussed closer home. In fact, they were timing attacks and serial attacks, targeting even the Chabad house in Mumbai, along with other religious establishments in Delhi, Aligarh, Mumbai and Pune. And this entire module was busted. They were going to use high tech, and this was all planned around this festival time. So there is a thought continuum. So is going to, just by eradicating or demolishing the infrastructure of the Gaza Strip, is it going to solve the problem? How are we going to deal with the ideological moorings from where these terror outfits emanate?
Well, each of the gentlemen who have spoken before has made good points, and it's clear, I agree with what each has said, concerning Hamas's evolution, at least tactically. I think we almost implicitly have given Hamas more credit than it's due, in the sense that it has always been genocidal with respect to Jews broadly, and certainly Jews in Israel and the region. I think it's an error, however, and this is one that the United States struggled with, and I think an error that the United States made for many years in the war on terror, to conflate and combine and view as essentially one ISIS or Al-Qaeda, or in this instance, Hamas. The tactics certainly have changed. The ideology of Islam, at least on the far right, has morphed over decades to become more vicious and more set on, frankly, genocide and forcing the world to become an extremely conservative version of Islam. However, the distinctions between Hamas and Hezbollah, or even Islamic Jihad and ISIS, are critical for a successful counterterrorism approach. The ideologies are morphing. Similarly, all of Islam has been affected in horrible ways for decades by this. But the distinctions remain real and significant from group to group. Hamas fundamentally wants to kill the Jews in Israel and destroy Israel. It philosophically would like to kill me because I'm a kufr living outside of Dar al-Islam. But if we view Hamas as ISIS, I think we will lose some nuance that we need to destroy and to counter ISIS effectively. It's an error that the United States made in its war on terror, to view all Islamic jihadists as basically the same thing. Ideologically, they communicate, they share similarities, they are moving in similar directions, but they are not the same.
But if they are different, but their patterns are the same, their doctrines echo each other, their actions mirror each other. So how do we then look at it? When you talk about the differences, it's ironical that Iran, which Israel is actually blaming to be behind or backing the Hamas, is largely Shia, whereas the Hamas are Salafi jihadis. That means they are Sunni. The Shias and the Sunnis also don't see eye to eye, and there is a lot of conflict that's happened between them, sectarian conflict. But in this case, they are actually the other way around. The Hezbollah are supposed to be Shia, but they have got grounds in Iraq, which is largely Sunni. So how do we then view this, Glenn Carl? And then we'll take it back to our Israeli guests, and then Sayed Tasnim. Yeah.
Sure. The common denominator, of course, for Hezbollah, Hamas, and then behind them Iran, is Israel and the Jews. And I think Iran is sincere in its anti-Semitism, and it's also cynical in its exploitation and in creation, development, support of Hezbollah and now Hamas, because it's a way for Iran to leverage and enhance its power in the region in this conflict with the Sunni, actually. So it's both sincere, it being Iran, sincere and cynical in its use of Hezbollah and Hamas with respect to Israel. Hamas is happy to take help from wherever it can get it, because it can only get it from Qatar and from Iran. And they being, in this instance, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, or ISIS, share many of the points that my colleagues here have pointed out, and they are important, and they are frightening, and we must we must somehow counter them. But the distinction to me remains fundamentally important. Hamas is out to kill the Jews of Israel and destroy Israel. And ideally, Israel and everyone else should work to destroy Hamas. The challenge is how, and Israel, for all the capabilities that it has, and I've worked closely with my Mossad colleagues in the IDF, and they are outstanding. This has been a nut that no one's figured out how to crack yet, without causing so much more collateral harm to Israel's image and to others that much of the entire Muslim world becomes inflamed against all Western and non-Islamic entities.
Because the moment a humanitarian crisis is triggered, Dr. Meir, what happened with the ISIS or the Daesh is a lot of the Daesh cadre escaped with the refugees. And then they spread across other countries, and the Daesh terror started manifesting everywhere else. So how do you control that? Secondly, if the Hamas are supposed to be seen in isolation from the other terror outfits, despite having ideological moorings or executional mirrorings, how would you do it?
I don't think ever in isolation from, but distinct from.
Distinct from the others. Dr. Meir.
Hi, sorry. I teach Iranian politics in Israel. I'm originally from Iran, so please allow me to use some of my research and some of my focus into here. We have to look at Hamas as one member of what Ayatollah Khamenei has called the axis of resistance.
Okay.
These are mostly, apart from Hamas and Islamic Jihad, these are mostly Shia groups in the region who have got their own political party in their own host country. So in Iraq, they have their own political party. In Lebanon, they have a political party called Hezbollah. In Yemen, they have political party, the Houthis. But more importantly, each one of them has its own militia. And in many cases, the militia of these proxy groups is more powerful than the armed forces of the host country. Okay. So this makes it almost impossible for the host country to rein in the power of the pro-Iranian militias. For example, it's almost impossible for the Lebanese army to take on Hezbollah. It could lose. The same for the Iraqi army versus the Hashd al-Sha'bi, which is the popular mobilization force for Iran's Iraqi proxies, and it goes down the line. Now, let's take the scenario that Hamas is dismantled politically in the region. Okay. Its armed forces, where are they going to go? Are they going to go to Egypt? Egypt is not going to allow them in. You see, this is one of the major differences between the U.S. occupation of Iraq and Israel's upcoming occupation of Gaza. when America went into Iraq, Iraq's borders with Syria were open. Iraq's borders with Iran were open. So the Iranian regime and the Syrian regime were pumping in jihadis and arms and money and explosives. Hamas will not have that luxury once Israel goes inside it. So first and foremost, its military infrastructure is likely to take a major hit. Politically, it won't die. It's probably going to exist in the West Bank.
Right.
But even if Hamas politically collapses, let's say in Gaza, still the Ayatollah Khamenei's axis of resistance will exist without one member, without an important member, but it will exist. And we have to remember that Hamas was ran in accordance to how Ayatollah Khamenei manages the axis of resistance. It's almost impossible for some people say Iran did not know if Hamas was going to attack.
Right.
I think, I'm sorry, that's almost comical. Iran is not going to give Hamas $200 million a year, $1 billion a year, and let them decide whenever they wish to attack Israel, when such an attack could undermine Iranian interests, could involve Iran directly, could involve Hezbollah. So this decision was taken by Iran and Hamas, in my opinion. It's a miscalculation for them. But even if Hamas goes, the axis of resistance will continue minus a member.
Minus a member. So that's another perspective here. Avi Melamed? Avi Melamed, can you hear me? Your thoughts? Dismantling the Hamas infrastructure, military infrastructure, is that going to help? Will it contain the cadre, or will the cadre slip away and will it manifest elsewhere? You're on mute, Avi. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, please.
I want to make it very simple and very clear. If we want to offer Israelis and Palestinians any hope, we must eliminate Hamas and Islamic Jihad military capabilities. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to hunt down every last person of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. It doesn't mean that we have to demolish the last rocket of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. What it means is that we have to eliminate Hamas and Islamic Jihad military capabilities to the point they will be not able anymore to continue and to dictate their will and the Iranian will on the Israelis, on the Palestinians, and on the region. Hamas views itself as a regional player. The end objective of eliminating Hamas, which is the first phase of change, the end objective of that is to make Hamas no longer relevant. Not a regional player, not even a domestic player. Now, as of ideology, we can't eliminate ideologies.
Correct.
Nazism exists up until our times. Other ideologies exist. You can't eliminate ideologies. This is not the point. The point is to address those radical factors who are inspired by these radical ideologies and eliminate the ability of those factors to continue and to play any relevant role. So the idea is very simple and it's very significant. If anyone wants Palestinians and Israelis to have a future of hope and prosperity and life, it starts with eliminating Hamas and Islamic Jihad military capabilities. From there, you can move to the next phase, starting to build different paths and different trajectory, a positive one.
But that's the final comment here on this conversation, and we hope to have more in the coming days in terms of building a strategy. Destroying the military capabilities, General Atta Hasnain, will not, as Dr. Mayer said, destroy the axis of resistance or Iran's motivation. It will be minus one member. They will create that pawn. They'll recreate it. So it will come back. It's not going to end there. So it's got to be something far more punitive elsewhere.
I compliment Mr. Avi for his intervention just now. This is exactly what counter-terrorism is all about. If you want to put an end to active terrorism, you do not have to eliminate the last terrorist. What you have to eliminate is the networks. The networks which enable terrorism. For example, finance. If you can ensure that you dismantle the complete financial networks which support terror, you can do away with terror to a great extent. The supply chain of weapons, grenades, all kinds of missiles. There are 130,000 missiles in Gaza and with the Hezbollah at the moment. Where have they come from? And if a country like India can seal off Kashmir to a great extent, I see no reason why the IDF, with all its excellent professionalism, cannot seal off the coast of Gaza. Where is all this coming from? Now that's the physicality of it. But besides that, today's world is all networks. Ensure that no networks continue to exist there. There will be lots of drug networks, financial networks, media networks, all kinds. We've done this very effectively in Kashmir, and we are thriving on that today.
Very fair point made that you've got to destroy the networks. One of the key networks is the currency, cryptocurrency network through which the funding has happened into millions of dollars, if not billions. That's the estimate. Watch out for that story here on CNN News 18 in the coming days. We've got all the details on that too, and there is a comprehensive crackdown that's currently being attempted by US and Israel in conjunction with certain other entities. We're building on that story and we're trying to get out all the details so that we can inform our viewers properly. So for the moment, winding up this conversation, thank you very much, gentlemen. Very engaging conversation. Thank you. We've got news coming through, closer home, ladies and gentlemen, on the Mahadev betting app. The Enforcement Directorate cracked down on the Mahadev betting app case. The ED has now filed a prosecution complaint against 14 people under Section 44 and 45 of the PMLA, or Prevention of Money Laundering Act, for offence under Section 3 and 4 of the PMLA. 2 kingpins and 1 policeman has been named by the probe agency. The ED is also probing political patronage angle.
Mr. Pandey, your prosecution complaint has been filed, so should we understand that the first leg of your investigation is over?
Yes, exactly. We have investigated the Mahadev app case and we have found certain evidences against the persons, 14 persons. 4 of them are inside the jail and 10 are some persons against whom we have found evidences, and we have named them in our prosecution complaint. Our investigation is still on, and probably we will be filing our supplementary soon.
So there are linkages to Bollywood stars, there are linkages that are being drawn to political people also. What is the evidence that ED has found so far?
Not much can be discussed, but a preliminary investigation has shown that the Bollywood stars are having linkages because they were engaged in the promotion of Mahadev app in some or the other manner. Many of them have participated in the wedding ceremony, supposed to be which in 200 crores have been spent by Saurabh Chandrakar, the kingpin, and they have been summoned, but they are not cooperating with us. Very soon we will be taking action against them, because summons have been issued to them in order to demonstrate that how and in what manner they are associated with these guys, and what money and in what form they have received the cash or some other way of transaction. They have received the money for promotion as well as attending their wedding party and all those things.
Stars and celebrities are involved and they are not cooperating. That's what the ED's lawyer, as they've moved a prosecution charge under various sections of the PMLA, has come out and told CNN News 18 while he was speaking with Arunima. We will track this story very closely. For the moment, taking a very, very short break. But before we go for a break, we got Arunima live with us. Yes, Arunima. So clearly the lawyer there, while speaking with you, saying that Bollywood stars have been named, they've been summoned, they are not cooperating, and they are going to go after these people who have all been listed there.
Yes, at least 3 Bollywood stars were named by Saurabh Pandey, the ED lawyer who filed that prosecution complaint. But more importantly, when I asked him if he was, on behalf of the ED, also confirming that ED was investigating allegations of political patronage in the Mahadev app case, he confirmed that. Why that is important is because it's election season here in Chhattisgarh, and Home Minister Amit Shah has made this a political issue as well, pointing fingers directly at the Congress leadership, saying that, you have lot to answer. Kisi ko baksha nahi jayega is what the Home Minister said when addressing a rally at at Jagdalpur and then at Kondagaon. Bhupesh Baghel rebutted that charge, saying that we were the ones, our government is the one which started the probe. We arrested 450 plus people, probed them. We also got a lookout circular against the kingpins based in Dubai. So there is back and forth going on politically as well in this case. And in that background, for the ED to come out and say that we are investigating charges of political patronage is going to be explosive.
Could it be anybody part of the Baghel, current Baghel ministry, cabinet, etc.? Are there bigger names involved, Arunima? And is the ED moving into the political patronage angle immediately, or are they first going to wrap up the arrests, the number of people who are involved? Also, any hard action on the Bollywood celebrities, because there is a big list, although only 3 or 4 have been named so far.
Okay, let me take the second part of the question first. There are about 19 A-listers. These are Bollywood stars, television stars, social media influencers who have been named by the ED. At least 3 are top on their list, and they have been asked to come to Raipur and answer the questions that ED officials have. As per the lawyer of ED, they are not cooperating, and therefore ED is now mulling what legal action can be taken. Now, legal action could be taking a court warrant as well. Legal action could be taking them into custody. ED is not committing so far whether these people are accused of genuinely or willingly accepting proceeds of crime. They're not commenting on that yet, but they are confirming that we are looking at legal options that we have. Now, to come to the first part of your question about political patronage, who these people could be, ED understandably is being very tight-lipped, but what we are told is that at least one cop has been named in this prosecution complaint. The charge against him is that he not only laundered money that he received from Mahadev app, but also provided them with protection. So the policemen in Bhilai, in Durg, in Raipur were 100% aware of what was going on, and action was not taken. The question was, were they doing this just individually, or was there political patronage? Were they told to look the other way? That is what the ED is investigating now, but no names coming out yet.
Arunima, thank you for your inputs. Short break here on the Right Stand. Stay with us. We turn the spotlight towards the Gaganyaan test launch, the all-important launch that's going to happen on Saturday. When we come back, G. Madhavan Nair joins us. Stay with us.
Hello, Moto.
Personnel and a few advisors. But when I exited that train and met Zelensky, President Zelensky, I didn't feel alone. I was bringing with me the idea of America, the promise of America, to the people who are today fighting for the same things we fought for 250 years ago: freedom, independence, self-determination. And as I walked through Kyiv with President Zelensky, with air raid sirens sounding in the distance, I felt something I've always believed, more strongly than ever before. America is a beacon to the world. Still. Whereas my friend Madeleine Albright said, the indispensable nation. Tonight there are innocent people all over the world who hope because of us, who believe in a better life because of us, who are desperate not to be forgotten by us, and who are waiting for us. But time is of the essence. I know we have our divisions at home. We have to get past them. We can't let petty, partisan, angry politics get in the way of our responsibilities as a great nation. We cannot and will not let terrorists like Hamas and tyrants like Putin win. I refuse to let that happen. In moments like these, we have to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. The United States of America. And there is nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. My fellow Americans, thank you for your time. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Good evening, my fellow Americans. We're facing an inflection point in history. One of those moments where the decisions we make today are going to determine the future for decades to come. That's what I'd like to talk with you about tonight. Earlier this morning, I returned from Israel. They tell me I'm the first American president to travel there during the war. I met with the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet. And most movingly, I met with Israelis who had personally lived through horrific horror of the attack by Hamas on the 7th of October. More than 1,300 people slaughtered in Israel, including at least 32 American citizens. Scores of innocents, from infants to the elderly grandparents, Israelis, Americans taken hostage. As I told the families of Americans being held captive by Hamas, we're pursuing every avenue to bring their loved ones home. As president, there is no higher priority for me than the safety of Americans held hostage. The terrorist group Hamas unleashed pure, unadulterated evil in the world. But sadly, the Jewish people know perhaps better than anyone that there is no limit to the depravity of people when they want to inflict pain on others. In Israel, I saw people who are strong, determined, resilient, and also angry, in shock and in deep, deep pain. I also spoke with President Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, and reiterated that the United States remains committed to the Palestinian people's right to dignity and to self-determination. The actions of Hamas terrorists don't take that right away. Like so many other, I'm heartbroken by the tragic loss of Palestinian life, including the explosion at the hospital in Gaza, which was not done by the Israelis. We mourn every innocent life lost. We can't ignore the humanity of innocent Palestinians who only want to live in peace and have an opportunity. You know, the assault on Israel echoes nearly 20 months of war.
Just a few days ago, Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a high-level meeting to assess the progress of Bharat's Gaganyaan mission. And now ISRO is gearing up for the maiden human space flight program with the launch of a test vehicle mission. The launch of a single-stage liquid rocket will signal ISRO's journey towards its ambitious human space flight program Gaganyaan, when the first crew module test to ensure the safety of the astronauts will be conducted by the space agency. The test flight is scheduled for 8 a.m. on Saturday, the 21st of October, from the first launch pad at the Satish Dhawan Space Center in Sriharikota. ISRO aims to send humans into space on a low Earth orbit of about 400 kilometers for a 3-day Gaganyaan mission and then bring them safely back to Earth. First, let us tell you more about the mission Gaganyaan and what it aims to actually do. It's Bharat's first manned mission to space. It's 3 crew members in space for 3 to 4 days. Mission would be to do a 400-kilometer low Earth orbit. Crew will then splash down into the Indian waters. Now, fourth nation, we will be, if we do it successfully, to launch a crewed spacecraft in and of course, let us now understand what's the best vehicle abort mission, what is this test vehicle abort mission all about, and why it is so important. Abort and crew escape system will be tested in this. It is similar to ejection seat in fighter jets. The goal of the maneuver is to safeguard the lives of our crew, engineered for automatic function at any altitude, and the test flight will simulate an abort condition during ascent. The goal is to test crucial system in case of an emergency. But the test will have to pass a crucial 100 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. 6 seconds into the flight, the FIN or the fin enabling system will be activated when the pressure exceeds 1000 pascals. Nearly 61.1 seconds after the launch, when the vehicle reaches a Mach number of 1.21 at an altitude of 11.9 kilometers above the Earth's surface, the crew escape system will separate from the rocket booster. The crew module will then separate from the crew escape system at an altitude of 16.9 kilometers, and as it travels at a speed of 550 kilometers per hour. The separation will happen nearly 91 seconds after the launch. The vehicle then enters the coasting phase, where it continues to ascend without propulsion. The drogue parachute is then deployed next, slowing the vehicle's descent. The final descent with the main parachute begins at 98.14 seconds. The mission then culminates with a safe splashdown of the crew escape system in the sea about 14 kilometers from the launch site. The success of this test flight would set the stage for the remaining qualification tests and unmanned missions. If the test vehicle abort mission 1 is successful, ISRO will start then preparing for test vehicle abort mission 2 early next year. This will be followed by Mission 3 as well as Mission 4 for 2024 to test critical aspects of this entire mission. In addition, the team has also planned 2 uncrewed missions with robotic payloads, LVM-3G1 and LVM-3G2, to demonstrate human safety of the mission before it gets to go ahead for the final flight. The human spaceflight program has both tangible and intangible benefits for us as a nation. It will lead to many more experiments with spaceflight missions. It's a fillip to Bharat's dream of setting up its own space station, advanced technology capability for undertaking human space exploration, sample return missions, and scientific exploration. Also, it will create a broad framework for wider academia, industry partnership in taking up development activities for national development, and there is ample scope for employment generation and human resource development in advanced science and research and development activities. It's a unique opportunity to inspire and excite Indian youth and steer many students towards careers in science and technology. The program will also strengthen international partnerships and global security through the sharing of challenging and peaceful goals. So all in all, it's the big test, and if we get the first step right, then we move on to missions 2 and 3. A short while ago, we had former ISRO Chief G. Madhavan Nair speaking with us here on the right stand, explaining to us this entire test mission and why it is so significant and what to expect. Listen into this conversation.
G. Madhavan Nair ji, Namaskaram. Thank you very, very much for speaking with us at CNN News 18. So this Gaganyaan test launch which is going to happen, how significant is it? And can you please explain to us what's the reason why this is being done, why it is important to be done?
The objective of the Gaganyaan is to carry 3 astronauts to the orbit and their safe return to the ground after the mission completion. So the safe return is something which is very, very important. So the crew, while the rocket is going up or any phase of the launch, there can encounter some problem or other. There is a finite chance of such probabilities. If you look at the previous flights of Apollo and other things, very much visible. So to ensure the safety of the crew is the most important aspect. And that is the element which is being tested out in the launch, which is scheduled for day after tomorrow. Here, actually, the crew module with the escape system is assembled on a test rocket. It's not the real launch vehicle which is going to take that, but a vehicle which is configured using the same engine as what is being used in the GSLV Mark III. So, there is a proven engine which is being put there, and it will be taken to an altitude of about 10 kilometers or so, and crossing the Mach 1. That is, the transonic region is where, it experiences maximum disturbance in terms of vibration, shock, acceleration, and all those things. So that phase will be over. So one can monitor the conditions inside the capsule. Then afterwards, while it is thrusting itself, how the capsule can be separated and taken to a safe trajectory to land in the sea. So this is the mission objective. So to demonstrate the crew escape system in case of an eventuality is something which is planned in this mission.
How is it different, or are we taking any learnings from other manned missions by other nations? So say an Apollo or some of the other missions that have been taken where manned missions go into space and then they come back, there's a re-entry that happens. So are we taking some of those learnings, or are we trying to do something different from what some of the other nations have been able to do?
Well, certainly the Apollo missions, they have taken a lot of risk. The vehicles, the launch vehicle was in the development of Saturn, vehicle was being tested out and so on. But still, President Kennedy has announced that we should land on the moon. So they took a lot of risk in going with a sort of an unproven system to accomplish the mission. But it was successful. In the overall program of about 16 missions or so, there were hardly 2 failures. But 2 failures is a big number when you talk about this overall program. So ISRO cannot afford to do that. So that's why ISRO set a goal. First, let's ensure the safety. Safety can come from various. First, make the launch vehicle reliable. Test it out number of times. and build in additional margins. Designs can be improved, and redundancy can be implemented, and onboard monitoring to forecast any problem which can occur, and then take action. This kind of escape system has come in the much later flights of Apollo and in the Soyuz as well. But in the initial phases, they didn't have it. So naturally, we have benefited out of their experiences, and that concept is being adopted. But the technology for that is homegrown. ISRO has to toil to develop this, and earlier they have demonstrated this at a very low altitude, and now it is going to be crossing the Mach 1 region.
But there is also the challenge. One is the challenge is to reach up to 10 kilometers. So as you're lifting off, and then but even the redirection or re-entry, there is a huge amount of burn and friction with the atmosphere that will be caused, a great amount of heat that will be generated. So will that also come into play? Will that also be tested, whether the craft can withstand it?
You are correct. Actually, we will have a lot of heat generated during the re-entry of the capsule, and that is one of the big challenges in design of the crew module itself. That, of course, is going on parallelly. But here, we will not be achieving the orbital velocity. Velocity, what is going to be achieved is around 1.2 kilometer per second or so. Whereas in the orbit, we encounter something like 7.5 kilometer per second. With that velocity, when it enters, almost everything will burn up. Of course, we have wetted our hands in this earlier in the spacecraft recovery module experiment. So there, we have brought a live spacecraft from 500 kilometer altitude down to the sea. And that is something which was demonstrated. And we had some elements of technology demonstrated from that. And that this knowledge is being utilized for designing the thermal protection system. So thermal protection system per se will not be proven in this. Whereas the acoustic protection, how the shock bounce and how the comfort level of the crew is ensured, etc., will come out because we are crossing the transonic region. And afterwards, it is the rocket which has to pull it out during the thrust phase and throw it in a trajectory which will ensure that a safe landing on the sea. Initially, it will be a free fall. But later, a set of parachutes will be opened, and that parachutes will reduce the velocity to maybe a few meters per second. And then something like a soft touchdown will take place. And when it touches down on the sea surface, there will be floats which will be actuated automatically, and the entire system will be floating in the sea. And it has to be picked up from there. So that's the kind of mission that part of the mission is going to be demonstrated.
Is this the first of many test flights, Mr. Madhavan Nair? And for this test flight, what do you think will be perhaps the biggest tick mark or the biggest success that ISRO will actually be looking for to achieve?
Well, one thing is the onboard computer system and the software to monitor the performance and to take real-time decisions on that's one part. The second part, as I mentioned earlier, is the environment inside the crew module. The third will be the physical process of recovery. Of course, when you are coming from the orbit also, when it enters the atmosphere around 100 kilometers onwards, the heating is there. But then, because of the aerodynamic heating itself, it will slow down to a reasonable thing, and then later thrusters will be fired. And when it reaches around 10 kilometers, it will have more or less similar speed as what we are going to do now. So the last phase of touchdown is what is going to be demonstrated in this mission.
You think this is happening because there is a lot of support that's coming in from the government, that there is an acceleration? There seems to be an acceleration in our space program in the recent years. Do you think there is perhaps a mix of not just scientific and technological innovation and improvement, but also certain amount of encouragement and political will? My final question, sir.
Certainly, I think I'm reminded. I was really excited to hear the statement from the Prime Minister that day. It reminds me of the days of 60s when President Kennedy made this announcement to the US. But he made only a small step, that is go to moon. But here, our Prime Minister has set a goal, not only moon, a space station, and even the mission to Mars and so on. So he has given a tremendous boost to the space program. Probably I will say that this is the third vision for ISRO, which is given. The first vision given by Dr. Sarabhai. Then the second vision, of course, I was part of that. We have given in the 2010 timeframe, and that is being implemented now. Even before completing that, he has given the third vision, which is super. And it is going to really ignite the entire space program and the space activities and the technology development in the country. It is going to be the major driver of technology development for the nation.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. I look forward to speaking with you again post the test launch, and let's hope we have achieved and we achieve all the parameters that we set out to, and it's a successful test for all of us as a nation and for the scientists of ISRO. Thank you very much, sir.
I wish you, the team ISRO, a grand success in this mission as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Brutality inflicted on the people of Ukraine, people that were very badly hurt since Putin launched his all-out invasion. We've not forgotten the mass graves, the bodies found bearing signs of torture, rape used as a weapon by the Russians, and thousands of Ukrainian children forcibly taken into Russia, stolen from their parents. It's sick. Hamas and Putin represent different threats, but they share this in common. They both want to completely annihilate a neighboring democracy, completely annihilate it. Hamas' stated purpose for existing is the destruction of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses Palestinian civilians as human shields, and innocent Palestinian families are suffering greatly because of them. Meanwhile, Putin denies Ukraine has or ever had real statehood. He claims the Soviet Union created Ukraine. And just 2 weeks ago, he told the world that if the United States and our allies withdraw, and if the United States withdraw, our allies will as well, military support for Ukraine would have, quote, a week left to live, but we're not withdrawing. I know these conflicts can seem far away, and it's natural to ask, why does this matter to America? So let me share with you why making sure Israel and Ukraine succeed is vital for America's national security. You know, history has taught us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their terror, when dictators don't pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos and death and more destruction. They keep going, and the cost and the threats to America and the world keep rising. So if we don't stop Putin's appetite for power and control in Ukraine, he won't limit himself just to Ukraine. Putin's already threatened to remind Poland that their Western land was a gift from Russia. One of his top advisors, a former president of Russia, has called Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania Russia's Baltic provinces. These are all NATO allies. For 75 years, NATO has kept peace in Europe and has been the cornerstone of American security. And if Putin attacks a NATO ally, we will defend every inch of NATO which the treaty requires and calls for. We'll have something that we do not seek. Make it clear, we do not seek. We do not seek to have American troops fighting in Russia or fighting against Russia. Beyond Europe, we know that our allies, and maybe most importantly our adversaries and competitors, are watching. They're watching our response in Ukraine as well. And if we walk away and let Putin erase Ukraine's independence, would-be aggressors around the world would be emboldened to try the same. The risk of conflict and chaos could spread in other parts of the world, in the Indo-Pacific, in the Middle East, especially in the Middle East. Iran is supporting Russia in Ukraine, and it's supporting Hamas and other terrorist groups in the region, and will continue to hold them accountable, I might add. The United States and our partners across the region are working to build a better future for the Middle East. One where the Middle East is more stable, better connected to its neighbors, and through innovative projects like the India-Middle East-Europe Rail Corridor that I announced this year at the summit of the world's biggest economies. More predictable markets.
Good evening, welcome to Rastak. I'm Zaka Jacob. TMC MP Mahua Moitra is in all kinds of trouble. Last night, her friend and CEO of the Hiranandani Group, Darshan Hiranandani, put out a statement which has now been forwarded to the chief of the Lok Sabha Ethics Committee, in which Mr. Hiranandani has said that Mahua Moitra had shared her parliamentary login credentials so that he could directly pose questions on her behalf. And often, these were questions that were targeted at the Adani Business Group and its alleged proximity to the Prime Minister. Now, if this is true, it is a massive breach of parliamentary privilege. It's a breach of trust and parliamentary processes. And also, most importantly, this is a betrayal of the mandate given by the people of her constituency, the people who voted her to be a member of parliament. Now, that brings us to the question, the moot question on Brass Tacks tonight. Should Mahua Moitra be removed as a member of parliament if the ethics committee finds that indeed her login credentials were violated?
Today when